Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K104 The Voice in the Night, episode 4 of book 1 Air. So, very good episode here, highlighting a very strong start to the season. All 4 episodes have been very good. Maybe episode 2 being, slightly weaker than the other 3, but still being very good. Depends a bit, of course, on if you like pro bending or not. I do, so I like it and rate it quite highly. It's a good introduction for the brothers at the very least. Here we get an episode where, on one hand, we get the introduction of Asami and Tarrlok, and two important characters for sure. But we also get a very interesting plot point of Korra confronting Amon for the first time, as well as very interesting character development for Korra leading up to that point, and ending us off on a very emotional point for Korra, and getting to see a different side of her character, which I think is needed and adds a lot, kind of showing you that there's going to be a lot of depth in this series, because we're getting to see this side of Korra as well, that yes, she's this tough, amazing fighter character, but also, she's been asked to do a lot here. She's dealing with being afraid, but also being required as the Avatar to do things, and just the pressure that she kind of comes under here is very kind of understandable. But we'll get to that. So the other thing as well is that it continues on the trend of this book being very discussion heavy. There's a lot of discussion to be had about what's going on in this book, because what we get here is obviously, okay, Tarrlok's involved. Suddenly Tarrlok starts mentioning this incident from 42 years ago that Aang had to deal with, and then Korra has a vision about the past where we get to see Toph, Sokka, and Aang, and is that the same event? We all obviously later know it is, but it speaks to just how well written this book is, in that I don't think there's too many other aspects of any of the other seasons where there's this level of kind of plotting that is required to make everything work together, a kind of gradual mystery reveal like there is here. And it gives this book such an interesting feel as well, because just the speculation around what happened in the past, that suddenly potentially some of the plot is actually going to relate to events from the past that the legacy characters had to deal with, and that combined with the lingering mystery of who is Amon and what's going on, it created such a great discussion kind of situation for us to be in as a fandom, and it worked so nicely. And then the strong writing combined with just it feeling like there's just a really big budget for this season. One thing that this episode highlighted to me that I forgot to mention last time out is just the amount of different outfits they've put Korra in. They've been very willing to just, whenever they need to, put Korra in a new outfit, do a kind of new character redesign. Whereas that doesn't happen as much in the later seasons. Whenever there's a character who maybe changes their outfit, it's seen as a pretty big thing, and it speaks to a sort of budget kind of situation, that look at the amount of outfits Korra's been in. We've had little Korra, obviously from the first episode, Korra in her usual outfit, Korra's firebending training outfit from the first episode, Korra's pro-bending outfit that's kind of loose-fitting, because she's kind of wearing Hisuk's gear. Then we have Korra in her pro-bending training gear, Korra in airbending training gear, Korra in the outfit she wears to go to the Equalist Revolution rally. Here she wears the task force outfit as well as her gala kind of outfit. That's like tons of outfits just for the first 4 episodes, and we'll still have, I suppose, a little bit more to go. It definitely speaks to, like, when this was initially just one season, I'd love to know how big the budget was for the season 1 episodes compared to the other season episodes, or if potentially it was just down to scheduling, that because they knew they only had 12 episodes, there was a little bit more time to put into designing a lot more. Because it's definitely clear to see that just there's a little bit more willingness to go overboard and like put characters in outfits and all over the place. So that worked, I think, very well in this episode. But getting into the specifics here, I suppose we'll start with Asami, the introduction of Asami. I think as we go through the rewatch here, we're going to notice that Asami doesn't get the same level of development as the other characters. And it's just because they don't really use her as much as the other characters. It doesn't feel like they have as much of a plan for her as a character. Not to say she's like bad or that she shouldn't have ever been introduced. It's just that Bolin has a character arc over the course of the 4 seasons. Korra has a character arc. Mako initially, especially in the first 2 seasons, kind of has a character arc. They maybe drop it a little bit more as they kind of, more or less, it seemed like the writers gave up on him as a character. But with Asami, it always felt like she's here and she's a member of Team Avatar, but where's her plot? And as we'll see, it's very, very related to her father. That seems to be what they've done over the course of these 4 seasons, is kind of have Asami have this very big arc with her family, make a big decision in this book, and that's about it, which means that Asami's strongest book as a character is book 1, but she doesn't get a lot of great moments after that, as we'll go through. And it means that even now in Turf Wars, I'm still kind of waiting to see a little bit more of her character, because there is so many interesting aspects to it here. Obviously, her appearance here literally bumps into Mako, enters the series, and suddenly the shipping situation is completely up in the air. Bolin sort of, it seems like they're leaning towards him liking Korra. Korra likes Mako. Mako likes Korra, but Asami was the first one to ask him out on a date. And all of this stuff kind of coming together. It's a clear setup for what's going to happen in the next episode. But for now, it seems like, okay, you know, I definitely always got the impression that it felt like naturally Korra and Mako would have come together as a couple if given a little bit more time. It's just that literally Asami bumped into Mako before that could happen. Which makes sense, you know, like it's not like it was super clear that they were heading down a romance road, but of course someone asked them out on a date beforehand, and that's where that happened. But on that development front, it actually, I like that it actually kind of is beginning to go all right. Asami likes Mako because she knows of him as a pro bender. She follows pro bending, and she obviously finds him attractive, and so they go on their date. Cool little moment of just her revealing that she's actually a Sato, and so she's related to Hiroshi Sato, who invented the Satomobile, which means she's rich. And immediately we kind of head over to the other plot point, the lingering plot point of, wait, what's happening with the pro bending stuff? We know that's sort of stalled because they don't have the money to enter the tournament. So enter this plot point of like Hiroshi offering the team a sponsorship. If they call themselves the Future Industries Firefights from now on, wear the logo, they can enter the tournament and Hiroshi will supply the funds for the tournament. And it's all happened because Asami has entered the fray, and Mako's now her boyfriend. So it, in that sense, it's all very interlinked. In that, like, Asami entering the play is not just for the romance. There's also this plot point as well, because the introduction of Asami and Hiroshi is also the introduction of a little bit more of the equalist subplot of non-bender issues, which we'll get into in a couple more episodes' time. Episode 7 is where that really kind of comes to a fruition. But what we get here when they go on, I think it's their second date, is also this idea of they have this connection, Asami and Mako, because very similar things happened to their parents. Mako's parents were killed by firebenders when he was young, and the same thing happened to Asami's mother, which we'll get the details on a little bit later on. But here we just said that she lost her mother. And it's definitely one of those things where you've given her an arc that's very related to her father over the course of the series. I'd love a little moment with Asami where we get a flashback to seeing Yasuko, who's Asami's mother. I'd love to get to know that character a bit more, to see what the family was like when they were, you know, whole, as well as, you know, seeing Hiroshi interacting with Yasuko and just how similar or dissimilar Asami was to her mother. Just characterize Yasuko a little bit. I'd really like that. And even if they have to do it in the comics, I think that's a nice angle to have, of like, she's had this huge arc where you see the impact of her father on her life. Now give us a sense of the elements of Asami that we see now, how much of that comes from her mother, and especially now that she doesn't have anyone left in her family, I think that would be a cool thing to have, to just bring back a little bit of her mother, whether that be her talking to Korra about this and so on. I think that would be a nice thing to have, because obviously as the series progresses, we notice the impact of just even a couple of little scenes with like Senna and Korra talking, or Tarrlok and Korra talking. Characters' parents, I think, add an interesting insight into the son or daughter that we're focused on as a character. So that's the thing with Asami. It's going to be very interesting over the course of this rewatch to really see just how much they do, or rather don't do, with Asami as a character, and how the likes of Mako and Bolin and Korra get strong character arcs, whereas Asami and Mako, they struggle to write a good arc for those characters. And it's more of a case with Mako where they kind of gave up on a lot of potential, whereas with Asami it's just sort of lack of use of the character. But it is interesting knowing where things go, to see the initial scene where Korra and Asami meet, to just be like, wow, the only real takeaway here is that Korra's a bit jealous of the fact that this has happened. She's taken aback that Mako's in a relationship now. And we'll get in obviously a few more episodes' time a little bit of how Korra initially feels, and then I suppose how her mind changes on Asami and they become friends. But it's interesting to see where it starts, and just like, wow, this is really where it goes from here. That's the end game relationships in the end. But it is what it is, of course. And I think there's potential here we'll get into, of course, some of the ideas, the changes they made with initial plans for Asami's arc in later episodes. But for here, I think it is a solid introduction of, like, here's a character who I think very clearly looks like a somewhat main character, is going to be a bit of a focus as we go forward. But I suppose next up, the other character we're introduced to here is Tarrlok, who by the end of the season is a very, very important character. Here, it's a really strong introduction episode in that you get the strengths of his character. He's an excellent speaker, he's on the council with Tenzin, but he can influence the other council members to support him, whereas Tenzin doesn't necessarily have that pull, and it ends up being this issue of Tenzin and Tarrlok basically arguing over the key issues, but Tarrlok tends to get the votes on his side because he often brings up the idea of, like, oh, but what if this affects the children? And that seems to kind of sway the others, that, like, what if this happens to affect you or your children? And that turns everything, whereas Tenzin's more thinking about the issue and the bigger impact on the whole city. In this case, the idea of a task force being formed to counter the Equalists, and how for Tarrlok it seems that, like, of course, they've made moves, they're basically terrorists, he's treating them as, we need to counter that. Whereas Tenzin's more thinking of, like, okay, they're terrorists, but fundamentally it is an issue in the city that non-benders feel like benders have a disadvantage, and there's an issue, there's a gap between the two of them. We need to more tackle that issue, and then maybe the Equalist, before we just immediately, heavy-handedly go in and eliminate the Equalist, which is this movement that has followers that aren't extremists like they are, but that the core ideals is something that some people can get behind, and that's sort of the subtleties that we're not necessarily dealing with here. And of course you can immediately see the kind of political machinations kind of coming into play here. He wants the power, and a way he feels he can get power over, like, the police force and everything else is through this task force, where if he gets the Avatar on his side, suddenly the media is very on his side because they're obsessed with the Avatar at the moment, and they're kind of wondering what move Korra's going to make. And if a task force is announced, of course they'd want Korra to join it, and that would bring a lot of prestige to Tarrlok, being able to say that he heads up this task force, the Avatar's on it, and he and the Avatar are making huge progress within the city to eliminate these kind of threats to the city. I suppose the other angle on this is that they're all aware of the triads, and Tarrlok even brings up the fact that Amon counters the triads, but I think part of the reason would have been a better political move in a way for Tarrlok to make the task force and go after the triads, in that it would have to some degree neutered the impact that Amon would have had, because suddenly he's eliminating triads by taking their bending away, but here's also the actual police force, going after the triads as well. And it would have at least created a little bit more of a dynamic going on here, but obviously it's part of the issue with Tarrlok in that he goes after the people who are opposing him. He's a bender, he sees these non-benders going after benders, and he counters that. Obviously they go for the different roads of like Amon on one side, basically anti-bender, and Tarrlok ends up basically coming across as like almost anti-non-bender, that basically labeling everyone who's a non-bender as an equalist and a need to kind of counter everyone. But you see the impact of like the similarities between some of the characters here and some of the themes we're dealing with, of just characters who are able to talk very clearly, give good speeches, can get people on their side. Tarrlok in the council, and to Korra to a degree, Amon to his followers, and it's something that Korra doesn't have. It's something that Korra, as a notable figure in the city, it's a skill that she's going to have to learn, is how to deal with the media, how to get people on her side through the media, and how to get that happening. Which she does towards the end of like book 2 and other speeches that she makes. But for now, she's in a position where it's something that she just does not have, and it ends up working against her very drastically here as she deals with some pretty big issues that she's facing here. Which is that, very interestingly, in the first scene, they kind of completely confirm to us that after the events of episode 3, Korra is terrified of Amon and the ability that he has to take bending away. Because at the end of episode 3, you knew that she was taken aback, she was shocked, and there was an element of like apprehension. But it was good that they confirmed it as like actual fear, because it's something that you don't expect Korra to have from the first couple of episodes, for her to be afraid of something. And confirming it through the nightmare and then her refusal to join the task force initially, it's so well done, because Tenzin immediately sees the problem in that it's the answer he wanted her to give to the offer from Tarrlok. But he knows that the Korra from just a day or two ago would have accepted that no problem. That's who she is. So something must have happened to the point where she's being very vague about this. She's just saying no. She's saying all the right things about her training, when we sort of know she doesn't care all that much about the airbending training at this point in time. So he knows something's up, and it's a really good thing to do in the episode with the two kind of, in a way, bookmarked scenes on this plot of just him initially asking her, like, if you're ever afraid of something, don't be afraid to talk about it. That's the first step. And then at the end of the episode, her finally opening up about her fears and how it's something that she needed to do, and not just kind of hide her fears or try to blow through them in the way that she does. It's a good arc for a character like this, to where you feel like, no, she's not afraid of anything. No, she is, and here's how she deals with it, because she's not used to it. She doesn't know what to do. And because she's in this kind of unusual place of just, she's come to the city as the Avatar wanting to do her duty, but she doesn't know really what exactly to do. She's not ready to tackle everything in the way that, a fully realized Avatar is. She's still just 17 and doesn't know the intricacies of all these, the politics, or how exactly to go about tackling things. And she's also just dealing with stuff like, she's having a bit of romance trouble, as well as just being afraid of the big villain in the city. And I like that they're at the end of the episode, they're like, oh yeah, you know her as this really tough character who's going to get into a fight all the time, but no, here's just the fact that she's 17. She's still very young. She doesn't know about all of this stuff, and she's going to have these emotional moments. But this is another aspect of why Tenzin is here for her, because he can help her through these things. And it was a really good performance by Janet Varney at the very end, of just the I don't know what to do. Like, for the first time in my life, I don't know at all what to do. And it's going to be a sort of a trend for Korra across the first couple of books, of primarily her just reacting to what happens in the city, rather than really knowing directly what to do as the Avatar. And it makes for a really good character moment by the end of the series where she finally knows what to do as the Avatar. So it ends up working out quite nicely here, but you can see that, you know, she's very inexperienced, and the way she's going about these things isn't the best. And I suppose getting into the meat of the issue that we tackle here, of how Tarrlok kind of manipulates her in a way to getting into this mess, is that she refuses initially. He tries to buy her off with gifts, but it's the manipulation at the gala that's really where it all comes down, in that he throws her in front of the media, and he knows that she can handle it, and knows what the media are going to ask. He's created a task force. Naturally, you'd think that the Avatar would be on this task force, and that it's dealing with an issue the city is facing, and she's being very vague about it. And so the media start to challenge her. Are you afraid? Why won't you do anything? And it forces her, based on her pride, of course, and as well as her, I suppose, in her view of herself, that I'm not afraid of anyone. I'm Korra. I always fight my problems. I'm not afraid of anyone. And it's her trying to burst through her fears, which are real problems, by just doing the thing that she usually does. And it initially seems to work as she gains confidence on the task force, with knowing that Tarrlok is there to back her up. But she almost gains a little bit of overconfidence in that she hasn't actually tackled the issue when she challenges Amon. She feels that that's the best way to resolve this once and for all. She's had some success. She doesn't feel like she's afraid anymore. But when it really came down to it, on her own, on that island, captured by the chi blockers, in front of Amon, she was terrified and didn't have anything to do, and was helpless, realistically, for the first time in her life. And it's a big moment to kind of bring the character down like that, but it's also a needed thing to kind of be, for her to move, I think, past just the 100% gung-ho attitude that she had before, and that this immediately is going to be like, she's going to be a little bit more thoughtful going forward here. We're going to see some development from the character now that she has had this kind of scare, nearly losing her bending like this. And it's, and I remember at the time, a lot of people, it was very much a back and forth discussion about, like, you know, was Amon correct to just leave Korra like this? He could have eliminated all of his problems here, especially with the fact that he's defeated, obviously, by the end of the season. He could have eliminated his problems right here. But, of course, the explanation he gives, I think, is actually very good, in that in the first episode he said that the Avatars arrived sooner than expected, we have to, like, accelerate our plans. We know the Equalists aren't quite ready yet. There's a reason he's still doing these kind of revelations and rallies to kind of gather support, because they don't have enough numbers yet, and while they're a powerful threat in the city, if the police came full force down on them at this point, they would be able to be taken out in the way that the task force does make some progress here. So you can see logically he's like, okay, we're a little bit behind on schedule and that Korra's arrived and we're not ready for her. If I eliminate her right now, every bender in the city, the task force, the police, everyone is going to come after the Equalists, and they'll just be immediately eliminated. And the only effect they will have had on the city is that they will have taken the bending away from the Avatar, and they'll be vilified by the entire world, basically. So he's kind of more like, no, we'll gather support to the point where we are a huge power within the city. We can be more powerful than the police, more powerful than the task force. We'll take down the city, and then we take out the Avatar. When the Avatar is the only threat to our organization, and we have enough power to counter any sort of a response, that's when I'll take you out and show that I'm more powerful than you, and, you know, I'll take your bending away then. Just the threat, and how Korra knows how powerful he is, and that he is going to make good on this promise. It adds this thing of, like, she has to train, she has to get to a point where she can at some point counter Amon, and it makes for a good arc of just, you've had this initial confrontation between the hero and the villain. The hero is going to have to go through a lot of development to get to a point where she can in any way challenge Amon. And in the background, Amon is just going to be building up his forces in secret until he finally makes his big public announcement. So I think that what he says here makes complete sense, in that if he if he just made this one move of defeating Korra here, he would have brought so much down on him. He would have been defeated as powerful as he actually is. Anything else to talk about here with this episode? I like the moment at the dinner table when Tarrlok comes in, and you can sort of see how Tenzin does not like Tarrlok. I love how Ikki just stares Tarrlok down, because it's sort of the situation where, like, does she sense that there's something like up with him more than just the fact that he's sort of a shady politician, maybe? It just sort of feels like that Ikki knew the entire time that he was like key to part of the events going on here. It was just a fun little moment as she just like asks him so many questions. You know, why do you have so many ponytails? Bye, ponytail man, and all that stuff. Milo at the dinner, the joke about, you know, like, that's a punch bowl, not a toilet, and all that sort of stuff. Hiroshi himself, I suppose, is introduced as well, and the scene here is primarily just to be like, okay, look, here's a non-bender who, from being someone who was very poor, became basically the wealthiest businessman in the entire city, highlighting a thing of like, okay, you know, we're talking about bender non-bender inequality, but as far as we're aware, the three biggest actually like corporations that we know of in the world are run by non-benders. Varric with Varric Corp, the Laogan Lan with Cabbage Corp, and then Future Industries Hiroshi. They're all run by non-benders. So it's an interesting one in that, like, okay, there's an issue, but it's also like, no, non-benders can do quite well, and while of course there are some problems between the benders and non-benders, it's not as big, I suppose, as the Equalists are kind of making it out to be. But we'll get into that more as we progress through the plot. But I think just final thoughts on this episode are just that I really like what they did with Korra, presenting this different side to her. That I think even back here, there were some people who were getting a little bit frustrated with the fact that, like, she's very gung-ho. She's very kind of stubborn and hard to kind of handle sometimes. I think we needed this kind of softer side to her as well, to kind of just confirm to us that she is going to be this multi-layered character. She's not just going to beat everyone up that she encounters. And it's the start of some really, really good character development for Korra. But yeah, there's the introduction of Tarrlok, which is a huge player. What he does in the episodes to come, it makes this book really, really, really good. Amon's plans obviously moving into play, and just, you know, other stuff happening as well. Like the introduction of Asami and Hiroshi adds some dynamics as well. So this is a very good episode. It's a very important episode because it has that key kind of unlocking this new side to Korra, the visions, of course, which we'll get into more as the rewatch progresses, and it just sets up a lot more. And I think the big thing with this book, gets the fandom discussing, because it's very mystery focused, and that's something that some of the other seasons don't have. But that's been my review of 104 The Voice in the Night. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.